I think we've had that shed in the backyard for over 20 years now, but the incident happened this past New Year's Eve.
All right, you ready, Dad?
My daughter was trying to teach me a TikTok dance.
Front, side, cross. Front, side, cross. Boom, boom.
I suddenly got notification from our security cameras that there was motion in the backyard. It says there's a person in the backyard.
A person?
Yeah, I don't see anything. See it? I'm gonna go check it out real quick.
All right.
I went outside to investigate. It was dark, but I noticed that the shed door was open, even though it wasn't open earlier. I looked inside and I didn't see anything. And then I heard a noise. So, what happened then?
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and as usual I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and downright notorious modern horror films. For those of you that are new here, we've got a link in the description below to our introduction video that explains how the Horror Movie Syllabus works. But in short, we take a subgenre of horror and we look at 3 representative movies from that subgenre. Today, the subgenre we're looking at is mockumentary horror films. And if you're not familiar with what a mockumentary is, it's basically a fake documentary. It's a movie that's shot to be like a documentary, but really is not true. It's not a real documentary. Now, if you've watched our found footage video, you know that the difference between a found footage horror movie and a mockumentary horror movie is pretty gray. They're not that different. As I explained in that video, the distinction that I've made between the two is that a mockumentary really focuses on the documentary aspect, the documentary framework of the movie, whereas a found footage movie is really more focused on the notion of the footage being found, of being an accounting of real events that happened to somebody. Again, those two things blur together. I'd say the Venn diagram for those two is almost a circle sometimes. And we'll kind of see examples of that in this video as we did in the found footage video. And a full confession, I really tend to like a lot of these kinds of movies. There's a lot of good examples. There's a lot of bad examples of these movies as well, but it kind of drove the need to separate these two things out, even though it's kind of a nitpick between the two subgenres to explain why there's two different subgenres. I just felt like there's enough to talk about to warrant two. So that's just full confession of why I separated out instead of collapsing these into one subgenre. So now that you know that and understand why I split the subgenres up, you'll understand that I just like these movies. The movies that we are talking about today, just like the movies we talked about in the found footage video, are movies that I think are really, really good. I think they are the best examples of what these subgenres can do. As I noted previously and also in the last video, there's a lot of people who dislike these types of movies. They're very divisive. There's people who love them and there's people who hate them. And I think that the people who hate them maybe forget that when it's good, it's really, really good. And so I like having the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the best examples of these movies, rather than the a lot of the trite and derivative ones that the people that hate the subgenre usually point at, are usually kind of decry as the death of horror cinema. So I think it's just a good excuse to talk about good movies. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. As you know, we are separating all the movies out into levels of undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate. And in this case, the levels are going to indicate the levels in which I like them. So the increasing level of how much I like the movies. So our undergraduate level selection, our first pick today is The Fourth Kind. The Fourth Kind came out in 2009, and it tends to be a really, really popular movie amongst a certain group of people. And I was going to say amongst people who have seen it, but that's not true. There are people who really don't like this movie, and there are people who love this movie. I think Sarah from Possessed by Horror is a really big fan of this movie, for example. Thinks it's one of her favorites. But it's easy to see why people would like it. especially if you believe in aliens. So if you haven't seen it before, it's a mockumentary, a fake documentary about people in Nome, Alaska who are suffering encounters with aliens, or at least that's what the presumption is, the belief is. And it's presented in documentary format, but it's interesting. It's like a recreated documentary, and this is one of the reasons why it made the horror movie syllabus. It's one of the most clever things about the movie, in my opinion. The movie is supposedly a documentary starring Mila Jovovich as the main character, but she's also as herself. She starts the movie out saying, "Hi, I'm Mila Jovovich, and I'm recreating this character, this real person. But when we can, we're going to show real footage." And so then it has real footage of this person from from videotapes and police footage and things like that of the real events. So it shows a recreation of those events, and then it shows the real events. Now, the caveat being the real events are actually just another actor filming in a found footage style. So that's what I really like about this movie, is that kind of meta take on it, to really, really try to sell you on the documentary feature of it by straight out announcing at the beginning, this is an actress. She is doing a recreation of real events, and we're going to splice in footage of the real events when we can. But those splice in footage of real events are fake as well. That's clever. I like that a lot. To me, that's the part of the movie that is the strongest. It's the funnest. I haven't seen too many other movies that took that approach, and that's a shame, because I think that's a really great way to sell the verisimilitude of it, to sell the reality of the movie. Right from the beginning, you're kind of just calling out the fake part of the movie, which makes it seem more believable when you say the other part of the movie's real. That's good. I like it. It's a really cool thing. I think that's maybe one of the aspects of the movie that the people who like it so much appreciate about it. Now, one of the things about the movie that people who don't like it don't appreciate is that evidently some of the movie is referencing real life missing persons. There are apparently a substantial amount of missing person cases in the area, and people complained that this movie was maybe exploiting that fact to make this sensationalist movie. I don't know about that. I didn't do a whole lot of research into this, just a minimal, like Wikipedia level, surface level research into this. Is there some insensitivity there? Maybe. I don't know if it's really that bad. I don't believe they're using real names or anything like that. I'm pretty sure they're not. So I don't know if it's really maybe people being overly sensitive to it, or if it really is kind of exploitive. I do think that the movie probably could have done the same level of effectiveness with the faux documentary and all those aspects and the alien abduction stuff without actually tying it to real missing person cases. So in that sense, maybe it was overstepping its bounds a little bit. I can appreciate, or at least respect, people having an issue with that. It doesn't bother me. I don't really have a dog in that fight, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, maybe that seems a little insensitive, but it just didn't really impact me. I didn't know it at the time of watching it. It wasn't until I did some research for the movie here that I found out about it. But it does give a reason why people might be turned off to the movie a little bit. I do think there's some people that just don't like the movie because they don't like it. They don't like mockumentaries. They don't like that style of filmmaking. They don't like the gimmick of it. But there might be people who don't like it because of this aspect of it. And if that's true, if that's the case, hey, that is your choice. That is your prerogative. And I stand by that for you. Like I said, it didn't turn me off. I wouldn't necessarily warn people off because of it. I don't think it's such a big aspect of the movie, or a big key component of the movie, that it should ruin your enjoyment of it or ruin your viewing experience. In fact, I think they could snip those parts of it out, those references out, and you wouldn't even notice. So perhaps that's what they should have done, but they didn't. So decide for yourself if that's a hindrance for you in watching the movie. It wasn't for me, but again, I didn't know at the time, so of course it wasn't for me. But I do like it. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's the most amazing movie ever made. The people who love it maybe are a little hyperbolic about it. The cult that seems to enjoy this, the cult following it has, are really passionate about it. And I don't know if it's because alien abduction speaks to them. I spoke a little bit about this in the found footage video about about ghost movies and people who believe in ghosts. Maybe ghost movies hit for them a little bit more. Same thing with alien movies. If you believe in aliens and alien abductions, this movie probably hits a little bit better for you than for people who it doesn't. And so that might be a big piece of it too. So factor those things in when you're thinking about whether or not you want to check this movie out. But I hope you do, because I do think it's a good example. I think it's a creative example of a mockumentary. It's really using the format to the fullest in a really clever and solid way. So I think it's a really good example of that. So if you haven't checked it out, consider watching it and let us know what you think of it in the comments. Let us know if the controversy is an issue for you. Let us know if you are a believer in alien abduction. Just let us know what you think. We'd love to hear what you say in the comments below. Our next movie, our graduate level movie, is The Last Broadcast. Now, The Last Broadcast came out in 1998, and that is noteworthy because that is 1 year before the Blair Witch Project came out. Now, if you watched our found footage video, you heard me when I talked about the Blair Witch Project, and spoiler alert, the Blair Witch Project made the found footage video. Not a tremendous surprise. You heard me talk about this movie. I mentioned it briefly when we were talking about Blair Witch kind of getting the credit for being the first found footage horror movie. It wasn't, because this movie came out a year before. And in fact, even this isn't the first found footage movie, because Cannibal Holocaust came out years before that. But this movie came out a year before the Blair Witch Project, and it's an incredibly similar plot. But there are a couple of key differences to it. Key difference number one is it really is more of a documentary format than the Blair Witch Project. Now, I know, and I don't think I even talked about it that much in the video, but I know that the Blair Witch Project is sold as a documentary that is just the footage that was found kind of spliced together, but it really is presenting itself as found footage. This movie, while it has the found footage aspect, also has the interviews that you would see in a typical documentary setting up that footage. So it really is more of the mockumentary style. That's why it's here and not in the found footage video. The second thing about it that differentiates it from the Blair Witch Project is the ending, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. If you haven't seen it before, the Last Broadcast focuses on a documentarian exploring a group that went out into the woods to do a webcast video about the Jersey Devil, which is this entity that haunts the New Jersey woods, supposedly. So already you can see the parallel to the Blair Witch Project. It's a very similar premise. Just like in the Blair Witch Project, these filmmakers disappeared, although one of them did not. One of them came back, and he's been accused of murder because some of the other people that went missing have been found, or their bodies have been found, and one of them hasn't been found, but enough blood has been found that he's been presumed dead. I don't want to get too much into the details of this because I don't want to spoil the movie for you, of course. But suffice to say that those aspects are what kind of differentiate from the Blair Witch Project, but there are tremendous amounts of similarities between the two. Not the least of which is it's shot found footage style for a large part of it, and shot very low budget. In fact, way lower budget than Blair Witch Project. Now, Blair Witch Project was, I think it was like 60 grand or something like that. But the last broadcast was something like $900. Now, maybe they're exaggerating that a little bit, but it's really cheap. And it looks cheap. I'm not gonna lie to you. It looks low budget, but it doesn't look bad. It looks like a low budget documentary. They really do nail the documentary aspect of this quite well. Again, that's part of why we've selected it here. Part of it is because of its historical significance, being a year before the Blair Witch Project, being kind of the progenitor of the Blair Witch Project and all the movies that come after that. You kind of have to give it its spot in history because of that, but also just because it's a really good example of the mockumentary. It really does a good job of establishing the mockumentary in the horror genre. We've had stuff in the past like, this is Spinal Tap, for example, that have done mockumentary before. But this was one of the earliest ones in the horror genre. So it really is kind of establishing the formula for the mockumentary subgenre until the end. I'm not going to talk about how it ends, but I am going to talk about the ending being somewhat controversial because you either like it or you hate it. At least that's what it seems from the people that I've watched talk about this movie or read talk about this movie. The ending does not end like your typical found footage or mockumentary movie at all. And I like it for that reason. I like that the ending is a curveball, even though one of the critiques about it is that the ending doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense. That is pretty true. I can't really argue that. but it's audacious, and I like that it's ambitious. It's trying something different and interesting, and yeah, you can quibble whether it was 100% successful. It probably isn't, but I like that I didn't see that coming. I don't think anybody would. I do think that that's a fresh take, and that's one thing that mockumentaries going forward, for the most part, did not emulate. And it could be because the last broadcast was a little seen. It could be because it doesn't really work so well. But for whatever reason, the mockumentary format is kind of set in place by the last broadcast, but the ending of it, not so much. Again, some people really hate that ending, but there are a lot of people who really like that ending. I kind of lean in that latter category. I acknowledge its flaws, but I really like it. I found the last broadcast overall to be very clever movie, enjoyable. It's not the most scary movie. Let me put that out there. Like, if you didn't find Blair Witch scary, you're definitely not going to find Last Broadcast scary. But it's compelling. I think they did a good job of selling the documentary aspect of it, and I think that's its biggest strength. Again, why I've chosen to put it here. I like this movie a lot. Very few people have seen it, so chances are you haven't seen it. If you haven't, give it a chance. It's not a very long movie. Maybe a little hard to find these days. I think there was somebody telling me that it's out of print now, so that's kind of a bummer. But maybe you can find it online somewhere. If you can, check it out. If you can not spoil the ending in the comments down below, that'd be great. But let us know if you were on board with the ending or if you didn't like the ending, because I'd like to know what other people think about that, and I'd love to hear your opinion on that. I really like you guys sharing your thoughts. So by all means, if you're familiar with the movie, if you've seen it, let us know your thoughts on all of it, and especially the ending down below. And the last movie we're talking about today, our postgraduate level movie, it's the Poughkeepsie Tapes. All right, let's go ahead and get into the Poughkeepsie Tapes. The Poughkeepsie Tapes came out in 2007, and that's interesting as well, because it came out in 2007 on the festival circuit, but didn't get released right away. In fact, I think it got released eventually on VOD around 2014, and then didn't even come out to home video for a couple years after that. The reason why that's noteworthy is twofold. Number one, because the movie had a hard time getting released. In fact, I don't know if it ever got a theatrical release, and it certainly did not get a wide theatrical release. And I think that's because of the content of the movie, frankly. And the second, it's noteworthy because it took me forever to see it. In fact, the video that I just held up, the DVD that I just held up, is a bootleg copy of it, because I eventually was able to track down a bootleg copy at a convention. Shh, don't tell anybody. But I was dying to see it. I'd heard about the movie. I had heard that it was pretty intense, and I was dying to see it. And it did not disappoint. The movie is pretty tough. I don't want to oversell too much. There are definitely tougher movies out there, but the Poughkeepsie Tapes is a strong one. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically a mockumentary about the investigation into police investigation into a prolific serial killer. And it really hits home really, really well. If you've ever watched those Netflix documentaries about various real life serial killers, you're gonna understand the format and tone of the Poughkeepsie Tapes. They really kind of have a similar tone or a similar style to those Netflix documentaries. So if you like those, you're probably really gonna like the Poughkeepsie Tapes. I do like those movies, those documentaries. So I love this movie. I think it's fantastic, but it's deeply, deeply unsettling. It comes off very realistic. The documentary style is very believable. It's really, really intense. Some of the footage that they show, some of the imagery that they show is just creepy. It's not so much jump scare stuff or even all that much graphic gore. So there's some graphic stuff in there, but just some awful imagery of people being tormented, or even just people being stalked, like children being stalked or kidnapped. The implication, the stuff you don't see in the movie, that your brain fills in for you, is really unsettling. It really can be a rough watch for certain people. There are, if you're a trigger warning kind of person, kids being put in peril, women being tortured, suicide stuff in here. If you're an easily triggered person, maybe just don't watch it. Like, it's got a reputation, and it's got a reputation for a reason. I really think that the movie doesn't undersell the dark nature of serial killers and the horrible things that people are capable of doing, and showing it from a point of view of the police and the media and stuff like that, and the families of the victims was a clever way to kind of remind the viewer of that like this happens in real life, and it's really troubling and really unsettling. This movie does a really good job of tapping into that real world terror that's very, very effective. Now I know Ryan Hollinger did a really interesting video on the Poughkeepsie Tapes that if you haven't seen, you should check it out. But only see it after you've seen the movie, because a lot of the disturbing stuff that I'm mentioning here is also kind of shown in Ryan's video, and he's gonna spoil it for you. He don't care. I love Ryan, but he's gonna spoil the movie for you. But his video is good. Check it out. But if you don't want those scenes spoiled, if you want them to have the maximum impact, maybe watch the movie first. If you really want to go into the movie and just kind of have it hit you like the way it hit me, go in blind. In fact, don't even listen to me anymore. Just go watch it, and then check out Ryan's video. But if you want a heads up, if you kind of want to get braced for what you're about to experience, then maybe watching Ryan's video first isn't a bad idea. But I do recommend the video. I liked it quite a bit. It's really well researched, and it's really it's got a really good take on the movie. I do like the movie a lot. It kind of feels weird to say that, to be honest with you, because the subject matter is a little bit on the gruesome side, and it hits a little close to home in terms of the reality of what's being presented. Like I said earlier about Fourth Kind, if you believe in alien abductions, and then Fourth Kind might hit for you. I don't really, alien abductions doesn't really, maybe, I don't know. I don't really have any strong feelings about that. So that movie didn't hit for me on any scare level, but I know for a fact that serial killers are real. I know for a fact that people do the kind of things that are shown in the Poughkeepsie Tapes for real. That's unsettling. That's where the horror of that movie comes in. So that one for me hit really, really well. For some of you, there's some thick-skinned horror buffs out there. Poughkeepsie Tapes probably, small potatoes to you. There are some definitely more graphic, more disturbing ones out there. We're going to talk about some of those movies in the horror movie syllabus in the past. Some of you might be thinking about August Underground, for example. We will talk about August Underground one day, not today. Yes, there are movies out there that are far more gruesome, far more graphic, far more disturbing than this. But I don't find them to be as realistic as this one. And I think that's why this one hits for me a little bit stronger than some of those. It's very realistic. The subject matter is very realistic. So that's my caveat when you're watching this movie, or if you're thinking about watching this movie. Kind of realistic, kind of hits hard, doesn't pull punches. So, beware. But I do hope you check it out, and I hope you let us know what you think about it. Hey, if you've seen it and you think that I'm full of it, you think that I'm soft, and you do think that there are other rougher movies out there, let us know, man. Let us talk about it in the comments. I respect everybody's opinion. I like to hear people talk about other movies, especially ones I haven't seen. I like to get the suggestions of those and get a chance to check them out. But I really appreciate everybody's input. You guys have been really great about giving input. Movies that I haven't checked out, movies that you think maybe should be in here. And when you've seen a movie that's on the list, sharing your opinions on it. And I hope you guys do that for this one, because I know this one has its fans, has some people who kind of decry it, and then a lot of people who just haven't even seen it. So let us know where you land in the comments down below. I'm excited to hear everybody's opinion. So those are our picks for the mockumentary subgenre of horror, but here are some extra credit movies if you like this subgenre and want to explore a little bit further. The first movie we're going to pick is What We Do in the Shadows, which is a mockumentary about the lives of vampires. And it's made by acclaimed filmmaker Taika Waititi, who a lot of you who are Marvel fans are probably familiar with. Or if you're Oscar fans, you're probably familiar with, because he recently got some Oscar love for his Jojo Rabbit movie, which, by the way, Jojo Rabbit, quite a good movie, by the way. And I mentioned that because the running joke amongst my friends is I don't like Taika Waititi movies. I don't get his sense of humor, and What We Do in the Shadows is Exhibit A. I could barely get through this movie, and it seems like it's right up my alley. I like mockumentaries, I love vampire movies, and I like comedy. This movie should have hit for me, and it doesn't. I don't know if it's a New Zealand sense of humor, because that's where Taika comes from, but I don't get it. I don't find it funny. I just don't get it at all. But I am firmly in the minority on this, in Taika in general and in this movie in specific. People who've seen this movie love this movie, and that's why I've included it here as extra credit. I couldn't bring myself to put it on the horror movie syllabus proper because I just don't like it. But I try not to be so biased, so I at least put it here as extra credit because people love it. People think it's hilarious. It's got some great performances. I won't knock the movie from a technical standpoint, from a performance standpoint. It's well made. It just doesn't hit for me. I don't laugh at it. But everybody else does. Everybody else thinks it's hysterical. I didn't like it. But full disclosure, I didn't like Thor Ragnarok either. I didn't find that movie funny. I sat in a theater full of people laughing, looking at the screen going, I don't get it. So don't listen to my opinion about the humor of What We Do in the Shadows. Watch it, decide for yourself. Tell me if you think it's funny. Or if you're one of the few people that don't think it's funny, let us know in the comments below. And if you're one of the people who don't think Thor Ragnarok was funny, definitely let me know in the comments below because I have yet to find anybody else who just did not find that movie funny in the slightest. So I would like to hear from you guys. But yeah, despite the fact that I did not really enjoy the movie, I would say check it out, make your own opinion on it because I am in the minority. People love that movie, so give it a chance. The next mockumentary that I'm going to mention as extra credit is The House is October Built. And The House is October Built is interesting because it's often discussed as a mockumentary. And it is, technically, but there are long stretches where it really doesn't feel that much like mockumentary. It feels more like found footage. And I thought about putting it as extra credit in the found footage, but ultimately decided to stick with mockumentary because that's what its reputation is. It's usually thought of as a mockumentary. It's usually discussed as a mockumentary. So that's where we're putting it here. And it's a good movie. The premise is it's a mockumentary about people exploring those haunts, those haunted houses that, the scare mazes and things like that come out around Halloween. And they're exploring those. And it's good. It's fun, especially if you like those kinds of haunts. Then this is a good movie to check out. That said, there's a lot of movies like this that are the premise is people go to a haunted house, a haunt, and a commercial haunted house, not a legitimately haunted house like the haunted house subgenre of horror, but like a haunted house haunt or a maze room or a escape room, things like that. In fact, there's so many of them out that I actually strongly considered making it a subgenre for the horror movie syllabus. And if we ever do the horror movie syllabus addendum or the horror movie syllabus supplement, I haven't decided what we'd call it if we did it. That'll probably happen because there's a lot of those movies and they're good and they're not all found footage style either. Some of them are just straight movies, but there's some good ones. Haunt is a good one that comes to mind. Hell House LLC, I think is what it's called. That's another good one that came out. There's also a documentary, an actual real documentary about haunted houses that people do. And I cannot remember the name of that right now, but that's actually really good. And that's a true documentary. That's not a mockumentary. Because of all that, Houses October Built feels a little diminished to me. But if you haven't seen those, starting with Houses October Built is not a bad idea. It's a pretty good creep fest. It's fun. And like I said, if you like those haunted house things, then I definitely think you'll enjoy this movie. I do like those haunted houses, so I did enjoy this movie. Like I said, I think some of the other ones that I've mentioned here might be a little bit better. But that said, those ones don't fit the mockumentary style, so that's why they're not being suggested here. But this one is worth your time. This one is definitely worth checking out. It's a good example of a mockumentary that is also maybe bleeding away from that format. So, and yet it's still often referred to as a mockumentary. So check that one out. Let me know what you think of that one. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. And the last mockumentary movie we're offering for extra credit today is The Taking of Deborah Logan. And The Taking of Deborah Logan has its fans. There are a lot of people who really like this movie and for good reason. It's extremely well made. The performances in specific are really, really good. If you don't know, the movie is a faux documentary, of course, about this woman who's suffering from like dementia and her daughter, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. It's kind of tied into a murder mystery, and as usual, I won't spoil it for you, so I don't want to go too much farther than that. But it's really, really well made. It's got the documentary format down pat. That works really, really well. The performances are excellent, especially by the titular Deborah Logan. She gives a incredibly brave, incredibly visceral, very real, and very disturbing performance. And she is, to me, by far the best part of the movie and probably the reason why this movie has kind of gone on to get a cult following and get people who are so passionate about it. Without her holding that performance down, the movie would not work at all. But because it does, it works really well. In fact, I would say you could have made this movie, leave out a lot of the horror aspects of it, leave out the mystery aspect of it, and just have it be a mockumentary about a person suffering from this disease, and it would have been tragic. It would have been incredibly compelling. But they don't do that. They go into horror, which honestly almost kind of a relief, because the reality of the disease is far more scary to me, at least, than the horror elements that get introduced into the movie. But it is a good movie. If I'm being honest, the third act kind of spirals out a little bit. It loses a little bit of its steam to me in the third act. I don't know that everybody else would agree. I think a lot of the fans would probably disagree with me on that. But for me, the first two acts, I was locked in. The third act kind of lost steam for me a little bit. I kind of lost, not enough to ruin the movie, not enough to cost it its spot here, not enough for me to say don't watch it. In fact, quite the opposite. Watch it. Let me know if you agree about that third act. Let me know if you think the ending is as tight as it could have been or should have been, or if you think the ending was just fine, or if you think it needed work. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that one. I do like it. I do think it's really well made. I do think it's a really good example of a mockumentary. So check it out if you haven't, and let us know what you think. So that's going to be it for today's exploration into the mockumentary subgenre of horror. I hope you think that these movies are worth your time, and give them a chance if you haven't checked them out already. As usual, I'd like to offer you guys an opportunity to have your voices heard in the comments below. Let us know what you think should have been on the mockumentary video. Let us know if you think some of my choices maybe shouldn't have made the cut, or if one of the extra credit videos maybe should have been bumped up onto the actual syllabus. Let me know what you put on your syllabus. I like to hear what you guys are coming up with. You guys have come up with some really great examples of movies that should have been made, or should have made your syllabus, or maybe movies of mine that maybe quite aren't as good as I'm saying they are. I love hearing all of it, so I appreciate your guys' engagement in the comments, so let's hear what you guys have to say. With that, we're going to call it a day. Thank you guys for your attendance. Class dismissed.